Okay, this is actually take 2 for me. Sorry if some of you saw a first version of this. I hit the wrong button. So anyhow, my name is Marc Sabatella, director of the Mastering MuseScore School and community, and this is my weekly music masterclass in which we talk about making music and we look at some of the music that you all have created, and I give my feedback and talk about different techniques and concepts, and we just have a lot of fun learning about music. So with that said, let's get started. So one of the things that I told you, those of you who are on, most of you should be on my newsletter list and or on the community and have already seen some version of this thing that I was talking about. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit today. What is going on? My camera is nowhere, right? So I say this thing, and are you seeing me is a question, because it looks like I'm broadcasting, and yet I think I just see nothing. So that's quite disappointing, right? Because I actually wanted to be able to see myself here. Front camera. Well, I don't want. Yeah, I want front camera. That's the right camera, right? Sorry about this. It's always something, right? Always something. I don't know how to do this. Okay, well, the visual aid may or may not be happening correctly. What did I just do? My gosh, I'm just doing all sorts of weird things here. Delete. And let's try adding a new version of the camera. Okay. Always something. Always something. All right, good enough. I usually have this sized better, but that's going to be okay. So hopefully you will be able to see me now, because I normally want this. Okay, well, you guys said you could see it, and for whatever reason, I am not. So I just wasted my time, apparently. Okay, yeah, upper corner of the screen, which is kind of what I was seeing too. So in any case, what I want to be the case is that you can see my keyboard here now. And if that's not the case, I am sorry and don't know exactly what's going on here. But I'm just going to talk as if you can see it, because it doesn't matter if you can actually see it. We can pretend you can see it, right? So I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but because it's questionable what's actually going on here, yeah, quite questionable. Yeah, you see the ceiling, and that's what I'm seeing too. So I really have no idea. Oh, and let me hit the update stream button. Update stream. That's the button I need to press. Not that I should have needed to do any of that, but maybe now it will work for real. Okay, so the deal with this keyboard is, I mean, it really is nothing, right? It's just a picture of a keyboard, and in principle, there's nothing this thing lets you do that you need it for, that you couldn't do without the keyboard, or that you couldn't do some other way. But I nonetheless, let's get it right side up, nonetheless find it quite useful. And so I just want to talk about some of the things that I do, and I kind of describe them briefly, but I want to see, I want you all to see it in action doing some of these things. So one thing is like sight reading, and I'm not a great sight reader. I'm an okay sight reader. So if I want to read this, this is kind of a hard piece to read. I'm going to read someone else's piece, right? I'm going to look at I'm going to look at one of the parts here in James's piece that we'll talk about a little bit later. I'm going to look at the violin 2 part here, and I'm going to just think through. So G, there's my G. Now, I don't necessarily need the keyboard to sing that. I can go G, and what I want to do is establish the key in my head. G. I cheated and got that first note that way. We could get the first note other ways. Tuning fork's so nice, but it also doesn't matter. I can just pick any note and pretend it's G for the purpose of learning this melody. But there's G, and the piece is apparently maybe in C. I don't know. Just because there's no key signature, that doesn't tell us it's really in C. And so when I look at the last chord, it's more of an A minor kind of a sound. It could just be that there's no key signature because it's too ambiguous key-wise. Atonal music, and not just atonal in a really 12-tone serial kind of way, but just music doesn't necessarily always have one clear key center, and in those cases it's usually easier to just use no key signature. But okay, so this G is actually that's like the scale degree flatted 7. So I might go G and then try to find the 1 from there. It's A. So I try to find those notes, and then I'm going to actually think about this. G, A, and I want to establish where I'm at in the key. A, G, A, B, C, B, A, C, E. I like to do little exercises to orient myself around the key and sort of understand where the pitches are before I start trying to sing. And then I can go G, F, A, G. Those are the first few notes. G. And now if I don't know how to leap all the way down to C, I don't. I like to step around, and I use the keyboard to kind of help me. G, A, C, C, right? I mean, I can go up from A to C a lot easier than I can go down from G to C. That's not literally true because I know how to sing down a perfect fifth. I'm pretty good at that because of the circle of fifths. G, F, A, G, C. I actually know that. C, G, C, because that's like a 5-to-1 thing. So I'm thinking and singing and visualizing what's going on. C, B, C, E. And now I'm here. And then I go on back up to G, E, C, C, E, G. So I use this to help me kind of visualize what's going on when I'm sight singing, how big my leaps are, and when there's chromaticism, how I'm going to work that in. So I use it for that kind of thing. But I use it also if I'm trying to sound out like something, like if I'm trying to transcribe some melody. Okay, I've had this yesterday or the day before, was somewhere and heard on the radio or on the sound system, whatever it was, the Beatles song, You Won't See Me. Do-da-dum, do-dum, do-da-da-dum, do-da-dum, ba-dum, do-da-da-dum, do-da-dum, ba-dum, da-dum, da-dum. Right, so I'm going to figure those notes. Do, do-da-dum. First, I want to know where my tonic is. And I think I've been singing it in C, so I think I'm going to pretend I'm still in C. And maybe I'll orient myself. C, drifted a tiny bit in pitch. C, do, dum, bum, then bum, 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 bum. If there's any doubt, if I just know it's a G, that's great. If I can go do-da-da-dum without reference to a keyboard, that's great. But it often helps to kind of physically feel where you're at. And then do-da-dum, ba, bum. And again, I don't know how big that leap down is, but I do. It's really a D. But if I didn't know that for sure, ba, ba, what I want to do is sing where the tonic is. Ba, dum is my tonic again. Bum is a step above. So if I didn't know how big that leap down was, by sounding out after singing, da-da-dum, ba-dum, I'm just going to sing the tonic is here, and then I can sing the note I want, and here's the tonic. Oh, it's a step. Right? You have to know what a step sounds like. But I'm constantly doing things like that. Now, you might wonder why I say that I can do this without a visual aid, and I can, but I'm better at it if I can relate it to something physical. Now, the next question is, well, why not simply do that with a real piano or a real keyboard with the sound on? Because then it's going to show you your notes. Well, now you're not learning anything in doing that. You're not training your ear. You're picking out pitches one by one, and it's a form of a crutch. This is a crutch, but it's a crutch that actually helps you heal. And you can keep using the rest of your life and it will keep healing you. It's like an amazing crutch in that way. But if you use a real keyboard that's making sound as you play the notes, then you don't have to think about what those intervals were, how each note relates to the tonic, how big this leap was. You don't think about any of that. You just sing a note and then you randomly try buttons on the piano until you match the pitch. You're not learning anything in doing that. And you're not improving your ability to do it again the next time. Nothing about that improves your ability to do it the next time. And that's part of the goal here, is to get to the point where you can kind of feel the sizes of these intervals and things. So yeah, that's another thing that I do. And then also I like to do just improvisation exercises. Like I'll change keys now. C, D, I'm going to be in the key of D, D. I got to turn my sound down here. D, E, F sharp, D, E, F sharp, A. I always use a pattern like that where I'm hearing 1, 2, 3, do, re, mi, and I'm feeling the tonic triad. 1, 3, 5. And I feel like if I know where those notes are, I can start doing things. So now I can start just sort of improvising, and I'm holding the keyboard and hoping that you can kind of see it. But I'll just start improvising, but singing what I improvise. Bum, ba, dum, da, dum, A, B, A, G, F sharp, C, D, E, C sharp, D, B, A, I think, but now I got to think about that. D, B, yeah, D, B, A. So I'm really thinking about the pitches that I'm singing as I'm playing them here, because now I know. And I'm not playing first and then singing. I'm hearing in my head first, just like I did with that Beatles song, right? I heard the melody in my head and then used that to find the notes on the keyboard. I'm doing this now. You just didn't know the song already. Like you probably knew that Beatles song. The melody that I'm improvising, you haven't heard before. I haven't heard before. But it's the same sort of thing. I'm hearing in my head what I want. It comes out very naturally from my voice. And then I'm using the keyboard to help me realize what the notes are. And the thing is, if it doesn't come out very naturally in your voice, like if you can't just hear a melody and then sing it back, well, that's something you want to work on, right? If you can't hear someone play a melody and then sing it back, that's something to work on in itself, right? You don't necessarily want the keyboard for that. You just want to work on the vocal skills. But everything that I'm doing here works on my vocal skills because it forces me to really be kind of precise about my pitches. And that's something. Okay, so Colleen, you've heard me over the years. If you're here, yeah, you're here. I think I've gotten better. I'm not a good singer, right? You all know that. I don't pretend to be a good singer, but I use my voice to help me musically, and I actually have gotten better over the years. And yeah, I'm very, very noticeably better to myself in my ability to do certain things that I couldn't do. The quality of my voice hasn't changed one bit, but my ability to sight sing lines and demonstrate things that I want to demonstrate has actually improved over the years. So I'm spending all this time talking about this device. Oh, by the way, the reason I'm holding it upside down is I made a version of this where there's 2 different keyboards, one on each side, and one of them I put labels on the keys, and I use this for teaching like young children sometimes, so that they have help knowing what keys are which. But this relationship to melody is an important relationship to have, and it helps when improvising because thanks for the confirmation, Colleen, that I'm that I am improving. That beats the alternative, right? So I, as an improviser, I'm constantly having to hear a melody in my head and play it and hope to get it right the first time because there is no second time when you're improvising. If you're not improvising, if you're composing and you have all the time in the world, you might think, oh, well, I don't have to be good at this. But that's not true. And this is a point that I've made kind of over and over, but it really bears repeating. If I want to sing a melody and then transcribe it, if I want to hear a melody in my head, like I'm composing, I'm trying to compose a piece, and I hear a melody in my head and I want to write it down. And my melody goes, da 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 da. I tried to go out of my way to make it a little chromatic, and really what I did was make it out of tune. So I'm already off, right? I already don't know what those notes were. It was too fast. So I'm going to be more precise. Ba-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-dum. I deliberately sang a different last note. Ba-dum, ba-da-dum, boo-da. I have now a pretty clear idea in my head of what that melody is. Had I taken my first, if I had taken my first kind of haphazard guess at it and then started plunking notes out on the piano, every time I play a note on the piano, I don't know what key I'm in, but I think is A is an A, so I think G. Yeah, close. I'm developing some slight amount of perfect pitch, I would say, but so bottom, bum, and then I'll do the thing here of using this bum, and then bum back down to the tonic, assuming I'm in that key, and then dum, so flat D. I didn't have to hear any wrong notes, so my oral memory of that melody is perfect. I mean, I know that's exactly what I sang to the best of my ability to sing the melody. That is an accurate representation of what I heard in my head, because I took the time to sing it first, clarify what I was going for before I started randomly pressing buttons on the keyboard. Because randomly pressing on the buttons on the keyboard, you're going to hear other sounds that aren't what you originally heard in your head, and that's going to mess up your memory of what you just heard in your head. If you haven't heard it with your actual ears first, then what you play, you're going to go, yeah, I think that might have been it. And then you're just going to accept what you played rather than be true to what you heard. So you're going to sacrifice something about whatever creativity you have, your ability to come up with interesting melodies, by just playing it and not really going through the work of singing it and identifying really what you're singing and working these things out, perhaps with the aid of the keyboard like this, so that you're really precise about your pitches before you start actually playing it on a real piano or actually entering into MuseScore. If you make the mistake, I would say, of just trying to go straight to playing it on a real piano, you won't get more than 3 or 4 notes without losing your original vision. And your original vision is now colored by the wrong notes that you just played. Unless you're already perfect at it, in which case you're not playing wrong notes. But every time you play a wrong note, it lodges itself into your brain next to those right notes, and now you're not sure. You might play a note. Is that what I meant? Maybe it is. I'm not sure, right? And maybe it's better. I don't know. But I want to work on being true to the vision that we're hearing in our heads. So anyhow, that's my soapbox there. And this idea of talking about melody and really always thinking melody is so important to so many things. So it came up when Louis McGee, you talked about this melody here, and it's really a cool melody to listen to. Let's listen. So to me, that is a super cool, interesting melody. It's a complex melody. It's a complex melody because it's very leapy, right? There's a lot of leaps in it. There's relatively few steps. In fact, boy, are there even any steps in this melody? Ba-da, right there. But other than that, it's like almost entire. Oh, there's a step here. F, G, and that's about it, right? It's other than that, all leaps, which is highly unusual. Sometimes we use the term angular to describe melodies like that are mostly leaps. It's not just that they're mostly leaps, because any arpeggio is mostly leaps, right? If you're just leaping from 1, 3, 5, 1, 5, 3, 1, okay, that's all leaps, but that's not angular. Angular is about kind of random changes of direction that throw you off. And so this kind of has that. It also rhythmically is quite off. So I hope that this is synchronized well. I'm going to kind of clap along to this. So my point in clapping through that, I actually got a little ahead of it. That wasn't synchronization. I actually got a little ahead for a couple of measures. I was rushing. My point in this is if you really pay attention to where these claps are, and I'm going to play a little bit more of it, they're not synchronized with the notes, right? A lot of these notes are not on the beat in 6/8. On the beat, on, not on. That's the next note. This, after the first measure, bum, ba, bum. After that, all the other notes were on off beats. Bum is on the sixth, the sixth note of that 6/8. This G is on the sixth note of the 6/8. This is on 2 and 3. This is on 6 again. There was nothing on the downbeat, and there was nothing even on 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or counting big beats, 1 and a, 2 and a, 1 and a, 2 and a. Nothing was on a beat from the first measure until here. And then it kind of continues that way. So again, this bum is off the beat. This C here is off the beat, right? Beat, beat, beat. So I'm trying to say beat and to point out that they're in these cracks here. So this is highly syncopated, highly complex rhythmically, and as I said, pitch-wise, because of how leapy it is. And these are all really interesting features of a melody. So, this is the sort of melody that one might strive to create if one is trying to create a really complex, interesting melody. But Louis McGee, when writing this, said, well, this was actually his first melody that he had written. And it's a great first melody. My first melody was boring. I'll tell you what my first melody was. I'll sing it for you and play it on my little keyboard. Ba-do-da-dum, 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 da ba-do-da-dum. Had that little weird hiccup rhythmically at the end. This was not an interesting melody that I wrote, but I was 6, 7 maybe. Somewhere I actually even have the sheet music for that. So handwritten, of course. So this melody is a ton more interesting, but it's definitely not the sort of melody that I would expect to be an accurate match of what he was hearing in his head. So I was asking some questions like, well, did you hear this in your head and then write it out? Or was it sort of like putting notes down and then listening to them? And because that's what it seems like. It seems like either someone who's really good at this, who tried to come up with something really angular, really syncopated, really complex and interesting, and then had really good skills in notating it, would have come up with. Or it's the kind of melody that you enter into a notation program, let it play for you, and then you say, yeah, that sounds good. So it's a great melody, I think, but it definitely raised that question of, okay, but now if you are hearing a melody in your head that's not as complicated as this, will you be able to put that down? And to me, that's like a really, really useful skill to have. And so that's how it came up, was in looking at this melody. So I'm liking the comments that are coming in here, and by all means, feel free to, just keep shooting comments and questions at me. I kind of made some notes to myself of things that I wanted to talk about. So now that we're talking about this idea of melody and how important it is to really be true to a melodic idea, the next question is, well, what do you do with that melodic idea, right? Because one thing that I want to do at some point is I want to go through a piece, and for whatever reason, it occurred to me Beethoven's Fifth Symphony would be a great example of this. And maybe you all do this. I'm going to put this as a challenge out to all of you paying attention here. Go through Beethoven's Fifth Symphony first movement, the famous one, that one, and try to identify how much melody there is in it. And when I say how much melody there is, I mean every measure is a melody, right? So if it's 200 measures long, it's 200 measures of melody, but they're not 200 unique measures of melody. Like this is all unique melody. There's not a single measure in here that's exactly like any other. I don't think you can find 3 notes in a row. This little figure of G, C, and C down to G, that kind of happens. That feels like 5-1 in C, although maybe we're in F. I say maybe we're in F. The key signature says F, but it doesn't feel very F-y to me. In any case, there's certain interval patterns that happen over and over, and fourths and fifths, fourths in particular, happen a lot in here, and that also lends that angular quality. Because anytime you use thirds, like here, it's a triad, right? That's a triad. 3 thirds in a row, or here, 2 thirds in a row, really, forms a triad, but 2 fourths in a row or 2 fifths in a row do not form a triad, and so you end up with different sounds happening on this piece. All right, so what is my point? My point is that the Fifth Symphony has a smaller number of actual unique measures of melody than it has measures, period. So how long is that thing? Is it 200 measures? I just made up a number, totally randomly made up. Someone look it up for me. How many measures long is Beethoven's Fifth Symphony? Because you can do that while I talk. However many measures there are, I mean, there's ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum. That's like a rhythmic cell. You could really say that's only 2 measures, ba-da-da-dum, because ba-da-da-dum is just that same cell repeated and transposed down, right? So, I mean, that's not even a whole lot of different melody to it. But then, right? So there's that, which is another development of that idea. But I'll count that as a separate melody. Then, that is that previous cell again repeated and transposed a little bit, barely any different. Anyhow, so you could add that up and say maybe there's at most 16 measures of that melody. And that's the same thing again. So it's going to be that same basic pattern for 16 more measures, or however many it actually is, depending on the time signature. But it's all based on really just like 2 or 4 measures. But okay, we'll say that's 32 measures. Then ba-da-da-dum, ba-dum, right, the horns, and then that is the secondary theme, the pretty theme. And at that point, that's it. That's it. The whole rest of the movement of the symphony is development of those ideas. So he gave you like 4 measures that he turned into 32 measures through development of that. Then gave you good 16 measures of unique separate melody, the pretty melody, the B theme, and then develops that. And then there's, the development section where it plays with those ideas more, and recapitulation comes back to the original idea, some new keys happening, but it's really you're not going to find more than like, say, 40 or so unique melodies. So, and I'm not just picking on that as like, oh, that's an extreme. No, that's how music is done. Long pieces are not 200 unique melodies. They involve developing an idea. So what does it mean to develop an idea? Well, here again, you want to have a clear sense of what your melody is and what its possibilities are. And here, Humpelum Music has this really cool thing, which is really great. This motif is the world's simplest little boo. I'm going to sing it. B, C sharp, D, C sharp, B. I'm kind of establishing where I'm at in the key. Ba da 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 dum bum. And bum is my F sharp, and I got to come down to the C sharp. It's right above my tonic. Bum is my C sharp because there's my tonic. There's my C sharp. Good. ba da da dum, ba da da dum, ba da da dum, ba, and now ba da 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 da. I'm singing it's basically a melodic minor scale, right? That motif there, ba da da dum, is it. That's the whole that's the piece, right? In the same way that ba da da dum is the whole Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. It's not really, but it's the basis of it. That and a couple other motifs. This motif is essentially the core of the piece. So let's listen to it. Nice. So I really like how the piece is structured, how it all comes together, and how it really all flows out of that first beat. But when I say it all flows out of it, it's not just literal. Like the first beat is the first beat. The second beat is the same lick, using jazz terminology, the same motif, to use the classical terminology, the same motif transposed up a third, right? So this starts on scale degree 1. This starts on scale degree 3. I call it flat 3. Y'all know that? When I talk about minor scales, I always relate my scale degrees to the major scale, because then I don't have to answer weird questions about what to call this guy here, the G sharp. That's scale degree 6. G natural would be flat 6. So to me, I don't have to say, well, which minor scale are you talking about? Is 6 going to be the G sharp or the G? It depends on if you're melodic or harmonic minor, and if you're ascending. No. It's just G sharp is 6, G is flat 6. That's my easy way of dealing with things. So so we get this figure here, is the same initial figure transposed up a third, but then we have this is a similar type of figure, but it's got a different shape to it, right? It's still got that repeated note in the middle, but now instead of stepping into the repeated note and then stepping out, we're leaping down to the repeated note and then stepping up. And then we get back to the original motif. Now we have another version that's all steps, but here, instead of all ascending, it's down and back up. So it's a neighbor tone figure. So this is what I mean by developing a melody. I kind of mentioned that word development a couple of times, but that's what development is. It's taking an idea and kind of giving you different variations with it to make it feel related, just like Beethoven does with ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum. That's a motif and then a repeated version of it. So all the things, how this thing is developed feels very natural to me. And then the places where you look at it and go, wait a minute, he lost the motif. He does it in ways that are very much akin to how Bach would do this. So let's follow this. Still the motif, still the motif. Now here, there's something different happening, right? It's a different pattern. It's this half step, do-da, boo-da, 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 right? It's that kind of pattern. And it's a cadence. That's 5-1 in the key of B minor. So he's leaving the pattern to establish a cadence. Perfectly Bachian thing to do. Now what's happening is we have what's called a sequence. And I talked about that either last week or the week before or both, right? The idea that you have a whole little passage that then you take that whole passage down a step or down a third or whatever. So we have this bum, 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 ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. So ba-da-dum, boo-da-dum, then ba-da-dum, boo-ba-dum, then ba-dum, bum, boo-da-dum. It's the same motif kind of moving in sequence, as opposed to what happened at the beginning, where he was changing the direction, changing things around. Here, it's literally a sequence. It's the same pattern. It's actually an unusual sequence in that it goes up a step, then it comes down, rather than usually sequences continue in the same direction, but they don't have to. But also the harmony, right? The accompaniment is moving strictly downward. Boo, bum, bum, then bum, bum, ups, bum, 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 then bum, 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 then D, F sharp. I'm trying to really think through this. I don't want to. I'm testing my own ears and voice here. But the left hand pattern is also going down, and so it's forming this sequence here, which is exactly what Bach would do in any of his pieces, like a fugue, that are based on a single motif. The only time in a fugue you don't hear the original motif, which is called the subject when you're in a fugue. So we have licks in jazz, we have themes, motif, and subjects that are all just fancy words for the little melodic fragment. Depending on how little it is when you use those words. So subject is the thing that you use in a fugue, and usually in a fugue, every single measure in that fugue relates to that subject, that one subject in one way. It's not like Beethoven where he had two different melodies that kind of sustain the whole thing. No, two to four measures of that subject is pretty much defines that entire fugue, except for places where he's like, yeah, I'm going to not do it for these couple measures. I'm going to have a sequence and it's going to help me modulate or whatever. So normally you expect a piece like this that is based on a single theme to have a sequence that maybe takes you away from that theme. And what it does is allows you to introduce a new theme, but not like just introduce it and then leave it behind. He's like, not going to use that idea over and over and over again like he's using the basic motif. He's just using it for the purpose of that sequence. So you get enough of that to say, oh yeah, something, I had some variety here, and yet it makes sense within itself. And then back to our original motif. And so, so yeah, when I was talking about the stair-step pattern, now the actual pattern that I had was more, that I was talking about was boo da da dum. So stairs are a little inaccurate. Ba da da dum. My pattern was more like this. It was more like B D C sharp E D, F sharp. When I say it was my pattern, I don't think it was literally my pattern, right? I was talking about someone else's piece. I don't remember what I was talking about. And so is that literally stairs? I don't know. It's more like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So it's a funny staircase as far as that goes. But I just use that term. So you've got a much more literal version of what that might be. Now what you've got is repeated note, and then repeated note, and then repeated note, and then repeated note, except some of the repeated notes are within the motif, and some of them are connecting one motif, the last note of one motif connecting to the start of the next. So that's kind of nice. So it's a different kind of stair pattern, which is great. So that's all good and by the book. By the way, one thing you did here that I don't know, I think this actually came up with the first piece of yours that I ever looked at. That sound right there. This sound that is basically a G7 chord. And then the F. I'm going to pause here and see if you can name what's going on with that chord. I will give the answer in a minute, but I'm going to give you a chance to say if you can not. It's G7. I just told you it's G7, but what theoretical thing is going on with it? Because I think I made the same observation on one of your pieces before. So it's a sound that you clearly gravitate towards, and it's a great sound. And it's good to know about what's happening. So the official classical term for what's going on here is an augmented 6th chord. We're in the key of B minor. And I said that G natural is scale degree flat 6, which it is. But this idea that you can have G to F sharp is it's a thing, and I'm going to walk through it really briefly because it's a really cool thing to know about. And as much as I like talking about melody and am talking about melody today, I can't not talk about harmony. So if I'm going to have a measure of B minor and then G, F sharp, B. I'm not bothering with key signatures. I probably should. Let me add a key signature, shall I? Key signature. There we go. All right. So if I and then let me make that a half note. I just have a real simple little chord progression here. And if we were to analyze what's going on, I call it a chord progression, but it's really only two voices, right? I'm actually only implying chords. I'm going to fill in another note here. I'll put in another voice. And at this point, I have to maybe cheat a little bit. Because I should be talking about a 4-voice texture, and I'm only going to be talking about a 3-voice texture. But so this sound here, we have a B minor chord. This is an E minor chord, right? E, G, B. It's an E minor chord in first inversion. The G is in the bass. And then, and E minor is our 4 chord. So Roman numeral wise, this is 1, this is 4, and that's 5, and then back to 1. So let's listen to this again. And this time I'm going to actually make this be an F sharp. Because it works better for my purposes in talking about where it comes from if I don't make this be a 7th, but make it just be a plain triad like that. So this sound, 4 going to 5, it's super common. And by putting that 4 chord in first inversion, as I just did, so I should really call that 4/6, it allows me to not have any parallel fourths or any parallel fifths that I don't want to have. Because if I put that 4 chord in root position, if I put an E in the bass here, chances are somewhere down the line I'm going to have the 5th of the chord of that 4 chord wanting to move to the 5th of the 5 chord, and I'll have parallel fifths. It just happens all the time. So having that 4 chord in first inversion is really nice. It gives us that half step in the bass, and it tends to avoid parallel fifths. So here's that measure. And now if I take that E and I throw in a little passing tone. So I've still got my E minor, but now I have that E sharp in there. That all it's doing is connecting the E to the F sharp, but it gives you at that moment G, B, and essentially F. G, B, and F. And if there was a 4th voice in here, it would have a D. It could be a number of different things, because the way the augmented 6th chords work, there can be that 4th voice is kind of a wild card. But it's called an augmented 6th chord because normally in classical music, it would be spelt that way, ascending. You're going to be getting from that scale degree 4 to scale degree 5 using that E sharp as a passing tone. And because it's ascending, you spell it E sharp. The interval from G to E sharp is an augmented 6th. So this is called an augmented 6th chord. But of course, it sounds like an F, right? And so it basically sounds like a G7. And really, we could just make it be a whole measure of not a whole measure, but a whole 2 beats of the F. So we don't always even hear the 4 chord. Sometimes we just go directly to this augmented 6th sound. So when it's ascending like this, we usually spell it with the E sharp. But in your case, it didn't ascend, it came down. And in that case, it could be just as appropriate to spell that thing like that. because now it's descending, and I'm more likely to want to spell it with an F. So, so anyhow, that's a sound that you use a couple of times in that piece, and it's worth knowing that that's what's going on. But yours doesn't actually resolve in that sense. I mean, you hit that note, but it doesn't. You know, your F sharp chord appears here, and at that point when it occurs, that F never got to resolve anywhere, which is okay. And Bach would do that. He would take that note, and maybe not this particular chord. He didn't use that chord a lot. But after Bach, it was very common. But I'm just going to make a slight little change here. I'm just going to throw an F sharp on top of that so that this F has somewhere to go. Yes, it means I now have 3 notes in this texture, so I won't necessarily really want it to be this way. But listen to how that F sounds in the ear and maybe gets to continue to that F sharp. So it would probably be more impressive if this was in another voice. And yeah, only do that. Move it to voice 3 and make it a quarter note. In any case, having that bottom somewhere. I'm not saying literally add another voice, but I'm saying if you wanted to really emphasize that traditional sound of that augmented sixth chord, you might want to figure out how to adjust this line to make that happen, or not. But that is something that I don't know, has a lot to do with where that sound comes from and how it's normally used. So there's that. I also like how when you bring the melody back here, now the bass line is different, right? The original bass line was half notes. And notice here you have that exact same effect of that E minor chord to F sharp chord. Whereas here, wherever that other spot is, you have that kind of E minor chord, but there's no E in it, so maybe it's not really E minor, but it's a similar kind of sound. It's got the G in the bass and the B up here, but by bringing that F in, it gives it that augmented sixth sound. And then, so now I like that the bass line is doing something different. So this descending line, it's not the same line that you had, right? Or is it? Is it the same line? It is the same line. Yeah. So it's really nice. It's almost the same line. It's the same line up until you come to another one of those kind of augmented sixth sounds, right? Because, right, you have that same basic sound again. So you have that E natural sound against the G again here. So it's really kind of interesting how that same melody got to work with a chromatic line and produce some interesting chords along the way. Now, in doing that, I feel like that passage there, the fact, like, I don't even want to analyze exactly what this chord is and how it relates to that chord. It's just a descending bass line, and I'm happy to leave it at that, and probably would leave it at that. But you know, it is interesting to look at the fact that A sharp and E, well, that would be A sharp diminished chord, A sharp, C sharp, E. So that's our 7 chord. And then it's resolving to this F sharp, A, C sharp. That's like a F sharp minor chord, a 5 chord. So we've got this diminished 7 chord going to a minor 5 chord. Well, diminished 7 is really the same as 5/7. So this is more like a dominant, an F sharp dominant going to an F sharp minor is kind of what's implied by that. But yeah, it's also just ascending bass line. You can take it at that level and not worry about it. It's when we get here that I'm a little more concerned, because here I'm just willing to accept chromatic bass lines as doing interesting things against any melody. That melody could have been anything in the world. I would be happy hearing a descending bass line against it because it's a cool idea. If you want it to sound really Baroque, then you want to make sure those details work, that you're happy with what it's implying chord-wise. But if if you're not trying to sound Baroque, then you don't need to even care about those details. Just have your descending bass line over that thing and it'll be cool. It's when we get here that I'm have a little more concerns about the chords. Like this chord here is actually, if you add it all up, ends up being kind of I think like a half diminished chord. Is it? Let me think about that. It's not, right? It's C sharp, E, G sharp, and A sharp. So if A sharp is my root, it's A sharp, C sharp, E, G sharp. Yeah, it's an A sharp half diminished chord. Okay, well that's okay, but then am I okay with that chord resolving to whatever this chord is? I don't know. I'd have to think about that. So here it's like there's a sense in which this particular motif, you're reusing it exactly as before, but putting some new bass notes on it. I might have here considered adjusting the melody so that it makes harmonic sense with that bass line rather than trusting it's all going to work out. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it feels like an opportunity to have done something a little different. So starting here, I would have left that melody exactly as you have it. But starting around here, I'd probably think about altering the melody here to make it totally make sense with the bass line. And I like that. Yeah, I like how that E sharp works here. Here, what's really happening is now this is more of a secondary dominant. This is more C sharp 7. So C sharp is our 2, right? In the key of B minor, that's scale degree 2. C sharp, E sharp, and then G sharp would be the 5th. We don't get to hear it in this particular context. And then B is the 7th. So that's to switch back over here, that's basically C sharp, E sharp, G sharp, B, then, right, so that's this chord. It's a dominant 7th 2 chord, and we lengthen it, and then it's going to the 5 chord. C sharp, it's an F sharp, and then A sharp, so it's this. And we take that top note off and then let it resolve so we can hear the whole thing. Right, dominant 7th 2 to major 5 to 1. That's essentially what's going on. And it's definitely always something you want to do if you're trying to write music that's kind of in this style, to be aware of these things. So when you do this, then you look at it and go, oh yeah, that's totally that. There's the C sharp, the E sharp, and the B. The 5th is missing, and that's fine. So this is my dominant 7th 2 resolving to 5 to 1, which is exactly what I'd want to see happen. So this really nice thing happens with your descending line harmonically here. It just gets a little kind of ambiguous in the middle, and that's where I think it could be improved that little bit. And then this is that section, and I asked people if it sounded rock and roll-ish to you. Let's hear what happens in measure 11 here when we get there. So the thing that I'm saying is somewhat rock and roll sounding is this. We have that B minor chord, then that A chord. That B minor going down to A. It's just a real classic kind of rock move. This nope. So that kind of chord progression where you're just basically walking down diatonic chords in the minor key from 1 to flat 7 to flat 6 to 5, making it a major 5, and then coming back to 1. That is just a super, super classic kind of rock cliche, and so I'm giving it kind of a cliched rhythm while I'm at it. So that's the spot that I'm saying anytime I hear something that sounds like that root position 1 chord going to that root position flat 7 chord, it's one of the things it has going in it are these parallel fifths, right? Between the B, F sharp, going down to A and E. So it's got parallel fifths. And that's, I think, where the sound really comes from. But it's more than just any parallel fifths. It's that specific parallel fifths that happen whenever you have that rock cliche. Right? Now, in this case, you don't go to a G chord. But if you did, right? If this was a G chord next, let's try that now. Well, you do eventually get to that G chord. Anyhow, it has that sound. And so that's another question to ask is after you've set up this one sound at the beginning, do you want it to sort of morph into this other sound, or do you want to take care of some details to make it not do that? And that's totally up to you. But I want to point out these choices to be made and the sounds that are being created so that then, you can be aware of these things. So in any case, I've talked quite a bit about just melodic things, that little digression into harmony. I do also want to at least, since there's been a number of people working on the prelude, the Bach Prelude in C, and things based on that, I want to just talk about that briefly and then go on. But yeah, I just want to summarize by saying that I think you've written a really nice piece and like all the things that are working in it and how it holds together. And if there was anything that I would be doing to it, it would just be focusing on just a couple of places where the harmonic story being told isn't quite as I don't know, fine-tuned as it could be, because everything else just kind of works out that way. And when you're writing two-voice counterpoint, usually that is the case. If you just write things that sound good, they usually are good, and if it sounds good, it is good, right? But it doesn't. You don't have to think harmonically when writing two-voice counterpoint, except in the places where you kind of do. And the places where you kind of do are when you start doing things like approaching cadences or using sounds like that augmented sixth chord that are so specific, or writing essentially a chord progression that comes from another genre. These are the places where you want to think about, oh, wait a minute, now I am telling a harmonic story. Is that exactly the harmonic story I want to tell? Whereas everywhere else, you can be happy just thinking about intervals. And yeah, I like the way these things sound. So anyhow, nice piece, like it. And I just like the idea of how you set it up. So I want to move on, just talk for a little bit about this prelude, even though people are kind of wrapping up what you're doing with it. But if anyone is still interested in this idea of composing something based on that prelude in C, right? We saw that how that Ave Maria was kind of based on it, and a couple people like, here's Frank's version. And I know Humbling Music, we just looked at yours last week also. And then here's one that Dave is working on and maybe is done with, maybe not, but we'll take a look next week, see where it is. Right, and we also looked at one from Jim also that was, some sort of elaboration of the basic idea of this prelude and then doing what you want with it. I just want to, for anyone who's still wanting to be looking at that or working on that, I want to point out the harmonic reduction that Frank did, which is really nice. So he just basically took the original prelude, which I should have, right? I should have that prelude here. Do I have it handy is the question. Looks like, well, I have the Ave Maria version, which is good enough. So this is the Bach Prelude in the piano part, and he literally took like, okay, well, the 16th notes in the right hand and the couple longer notes in the left hand, let's just write them all out as a chord. So, boo dum boo dum dum bum bum. Right, so that is the first measure collapsed into one chord. And so that's what he's done. Every single measure, he's collapsed it into a chord, and then he's put a chord symbol on it. He's put a Roman numeral on it. He's identified whether this chord is a tonic or a subdominant or dominant type of chord. He's identified some voice leading things where there's some common tones happening. And then he's also talking about the voice leading that happens down here, I think. That, or maybe this is, the bottom thing is just showing what chord tones are in the left hand. Yeah, that's showing what the chord tones are. It would also be interesting to just talk about because he's identified the common tones with these red lines, but it would also be interesting to follow the other voice, to follow each of the voices, really, and think about what's happening with them. But you don't need that notated. You just look at it and go, oh, yeah, there's a D as the middle note of this one. There's a C as the middle note of that one. Look at it or listen to it, navigate through it, however you like to peruse your music. But anyhow, he's got it all nicely kind of analyzed there. And then when it is just a diatonic chord, he's just saying it's tonic, subdominant, or tonic, or dominant, or whatever it is. But when there's non-diatonic chords here, like as we reach this point, D7 is a secondary dominant leading to G. Which he's calling a dominant. And I had made the point that, well, maybe we've really modulated to G. Maybe not. Doesn't really matter if you call it a modulation or not. But in any case, he's got some pretty good analysis here of what's happening. Here's a diminished approach chord. That's what DAC stands for. And when he's identifying chords as tonic chords, it doesn't mean it's literally just the one chord, like the A minor chord is serving tonic function. This is a term that comes from harmony. So, but it's also in the key of G. That would be subdominant. That would be 2 to 5 to 1. This is 2, 5, 1 in G. So if we think of that as a little tonicization or modulation of G, then we can just see this A minor as the 2 chord in that key. But it also happens to be diatonic to the key of C. And in Bach's modulations, you'll expect that kind of overlap. The first chord of the modulation will be a chord that was diatonic. There'll always be that kind of pivot chord. Almost always be a pivot chord, a chord that can have a function in the old key as well as the new key. That's kind of a hallmark of Baroque and classical modulations. So in any case, anyone who's looking to write anything based on that prelude, here's a nice harmonic reduction. Let me get the link to it because I know it's in here. There it is. I'm going to post the link here in the chat. He posted it in the community also, so you'll be able to find it there. So by all means, take a look at it. And then next week, I'll, we'll look at a couple of the other pieces that were submitted, a couple of people who also wrote pieces on that prelude. And I want to come back to that one that I sang a little bit of because it's a really beautiful piece. In fact, I'm just going to play it out because it's really beautiful. And let's do that before we go. Let's just hear this nice, short, beautiful piece. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking a little bit about more about this piece next time, because there's some really beautiful things that are happening in it, and there's an interesting story associated with it here on MuseScore.com. Did I post the link there? Yes, I did post that link. Anyhow, all this stuff's in the community, so you can find it there. But this is James's Shmuel's Lament. By the way, just one little thing. I think there's probably parallel fifth here. Maybe not parallel, but there's an open fifth, and that's something I'd say, well, don't do that unless that's the sound you want. And he clearly wanted that sound because it works really well. These going from this really beautiful full sound here, where there's like some sort of non-chord tone happening, to that real simple sound to conclude the piece. I feel like that's a real deliberate thing happening. There's something about that ending that reminds me of the Downton Abbey theme music, which is its own little world of cliches, and cliche being a good thing, right? It's like a thing that you do in music to get a particular effect, and it works. That's why it's called a cliche. Okay, in any case, I hope you've enjoyed some of the things that I've talked about. Tried to talk about a number of different things on a number of different topics, mostly relating to melody. But let's. And by the way, sorry I wasn't able to do the cafe yesterday. I'm taking care of some things, visiting my family in Florida. But my parents are somewhat older than me, as I imagine is true for most of you. And so we've got some health and other sorts of issues that we're trying to take care of, and sometimes we just have to have meetings and figure some stuff out. So in any case, everything's fine. Just wanted to let you know. I'm not sure where I'll be next week, but I expect I will be able to be coming at you for the music masterclass. So thanks everyone again for being here this week, and we do this every Thursday, and it's a lot of fun, the Music Masterclass. If you haven't already, be sure to sign up in the community. The link is at the top of the chat, and just sign up so you can, post your own music there, and I've got instructions on how to do that, and comment on other people's music. And you can also get the links to the MuseScore Cafe and also all my online courses. So I'm working hard now again on the counterpoint course, and I'll probably talk about that some more coming up. Got lots of things I want to talk about coming up, and we just keep doing it. And every week I'll talk about something. So hope you're all have a great week, and I will see you next time.